I'm Sandy Peterson, and this is my son Grant, one of the more experienced players of Cthulhu Wars. We're going to talk about the strategies in detail. I'm going to talk about the exact abilities and spellbooks each faction gets.
I'll be talking about strategies for playing each of the factions.
Crawling Chaos begins in South Asia with 6 cultists in the gate, and from the very start of the game they benefit strongly from their faction ability, which is that they can fly. This means all of their units, when you move them, they move 2 spaces instead of 1. So a cultist, on the first turn of the game or any time, you spend 2 power, it can fly across the North Pacific to North America, it can fly across the Indian Ocean to Antarctica, it can fly to Africa, or they can strike almost anywhere on the globe. If you look at the map and see how things connect up, for example, you can fly through the North Pacific, and here it connects up to the North Atlantic, and you go clear to here in one round. So they really can strike far in a field and hit everything on the map. Their spell books, well, let's talk about the monsters first. So first they have the Night Gaunt. This is a 0 combat, 1-point monster, very inexpensive, easy to summon early. And again, the fact that it can fly makes it very handy for a lot of purposes. The Flying Polyp costs 2 power and has a combat of 1, but its special ability, which we'll get into in a minute, makes it worthwhile even as a 1-point monster. Finally, there's the Mighty Hunting Horror. The Hunting Horror, with the huge bat wings, it costs 3 to summon and has a power of 2. Lastly, we have Nyarlathotep himself. Nyarlathotep is the simplest Great Old One to summon in terms of rules. You simply have to have a gate somewhere on the map, you spend 10 power and put him onto the board. Now, Nyarlathotep has an ability called the Harbinger. And what this does is, if Nyarlathotep is in a battle in which he's fighting another Great Old One, then if that enemy Great Old One gets killed or pained, even if Nyarlathotep is killed or pained too, but if he pains, kills the other one, then he gets either power equal to half the cost to summon that Great Old One, or he gets 2 Elder Signs. So for example, if he was to kill or pain Cthulhu, he could either get 2 power or 2 Elder Signs, because it costs 4 power to resummon Cthulhu. He would get the same if he killed or pained the King in Yellow. So usually what he does is when he's fighting someone that is only that you only get 2 power from, the Elder Signs are a better deal. But if he's fighting someone who costs more, like Hastur or the Black Goat, he may want to get the power. Okay, spellbooks, or how to get spellbooks. Now that spellbooks are all things that are good for him to do. Well, almost all of them. First, if he controls 3 gates on the map, anywhere on the map, he gets a spellbook. Then, the next one is, he must control 4 gates anywhere on the map. This gets him another spellbook. The third likeliest one for him to get is to capture an enemy cultist. If you can do it with Night Gaunts are a useful way of doing that early in the game because they can fly all around, they're cheap to produce, you don't really care if they get killed because they're so cheap. Nyarlathotep, when he comes out later on, since he can fly around too, just like everyone else in his faction, he can go places that are awkward for the enemy to bring their own Great Old Ones to stop you, and he can often capture a cultist. But once you capture a cultist, you immediately get the next one. Of course, like all factions, summoning or awakening your Great Old One gets you a spellbook. And his final spellbooks are, as your action for that round, pay 4 power. So you'd simply pay 4 power, and then you'd pick a spell and place it there. He has 2 actions just like this. Each one of them pays 4 power, he gets a spellbook. He can pay 8 power in 1 round to get both spellbooks, but that's only situationally useful. But it's there just in case he wants to do it. So he can get 2 spellbooks in 1 round if he does that. Now, here are the spellbooks he could choose to get. One of the early ones he often gets is Abduct. Abduct is specifically for your Night Gaunts. When you get Abduct, then what happens is the battle ability. Just before battle, let's say he's fighting red here. Just before the battle begins, the Night Gaunt says, I'm abducting. You remove the Night Gaunt from the board, and he carries off one of the defenders. The defender picks who is carried off, but someone gets lost. So in this case, he'd probably pick his ghoul. But whatever it is, for example, say that you're fighting an area where all the enemy has is a Byaki, and you abduct. Well, the Byaki goes away. That's a 2-point monster that you killed for losing only a crappy 1-point monster. And of course, when he gets his Byaki back, it's harder to get into the area that, so it's a good ability. It gets rid of enemies that are there before you do your big attack. So for example, if a strong enemy like Cthulhu is defended by star spawns and shoggoths, a couple of night gaunts can be very discouraging. Because if they carry off something big like a star spawn, that's an instant kill for something as great as a star spawn. So that's what the night gaunts do with the duct. Next we have invisibility. Invisibility is the special power of the flying polyps. Now, invisibility is quite a marvelous ability with a lot of tactical uses. What it does is, in combat, you can pick one unit in the combat to be invisible. That unit doesn't participate in the rest of the combat. For example, let's see if the flying polyp was here and he's about to attack Black Goat. Before the fight starts, the flying polyp says, I am turning the cultist invisible. He can pick whoever he wants, so he can pick the cultist. Or he can pick himself. For example, if Cthulhu was here getting ready to fight him, he could say, I'm going to be invisible. And then Cthulhu can't fight the flying polyp because, it's invisible. So if he was fighting red here, he could pick the cultist to be invisible. Then the cultist can't roll his die in combat because Black Goat gets a die in combat. Then there's only the ghoul left. The flying polyp rolls his one die. The ghoul rolls 0. He probably scares the ghoul out. And then he's left behind with the cultist all by himself, which is always a good thing for a monster. So invisibility is good defensively. You can turn your own things invisible. You can turn enemies invisible. And unlike a lot of battle abilities, you can pick which guy goes invisible. Again, like most abilities, you can't pick a great old. You can't turn Cthulhu invisible. He's too big. You only get part of him invisible, like his navel, and then it'd be bad. Okay. Third, we have the Hunting Horror, whose special ability is Seek and Destroy. This is not only a very useful defensive ability and offensive, but also gives you a lot of flexibility as far as your power cost. And here's how it works. You summon a Hunting Horror anywhere on the map, and then when you declare battle, you immediately teleport any Hunting Horrors you want directly to the battle. So for example, say this was the fight we were going to do. First, the flying polyp could turn the cultist invisible when he declared battle, and then you'd fly in your Hunting Horror, and now he's going to roll 3 dice against the ghoul's 0 dice because the cultist is invisible, he doesn't get to fight, and the ghoul doesn't roll any dice, so it gives you extra dice. Anathema, for example, can move somewhere to go into battle, like here, and then declare battle, and then fly in the Hunting Horror. That adds 2 extra dice to his attack, and gives him extra hits if he is attacked. So for example, if Nyarlathotep is foolish enough to be out in his own somewhere, and Cthulhu comes to try to kill him, when the battle's declared, even though Cthulhu declared it, in comes the Hunting Horror, and now Cthulhu has to get 2 kills to get to Nyarlathotep, or even 3 if you have 2 Hunting Horrors. So it gives you extra defense that way, it gives you extra offense when you're rolling dice. It's just a terrific ability, and makes the Hunting Horrors one of the most flexible 3-point monsters in the game. Okay, next we have the great ability of Madness. This is usually a showstopper when people learn about it, and what it does is whenever there is a combat anywhere on the map, you choose where the people are retreated on a pane. For example, let us say that there was a little fight here between red and green. After the fight, 1 unit on each side is pain. So red says you're going to pain the ghoul, and green says I want you to pain the cultist. Well, because you have Madness as calling chaos, you pick where they go. You say, well, the ghoul's going to go here, and the cultist is going to go here, where I have monsters that can capture him. And then, right? So you pick where things are. You even pick where get older. Like if Cthulhu was there and he got pained, you'd pick where Cthulhu went. You can't violate normal rules. For example, you couldn't pain this cultist to this area where there's a green unit if they just fought. But aside from that, you can pain them and do it however you want. Now, normally in a combat, the attackers is pained first, then the defender, but when you have Madness, you can pain the defender first. Sometimes you can arrange things so when the pain completely surrounds an area, and so the other units left in there can't retreat, and so one of them dies. So Madness is a pretty great thing. Throughout the course of the game, what happens with Madness is that the enemy units get more and more scattered and in bad places, and of course when your units retreat, since you pick where yours retreat as well, yours always go to the best possible place. So pains are not as bad for you, and they're worse for your enemies. All right, Emissary of the Outer Gods. This requires Nyarlathotep because what it says is, unless an enemy great old one is in the battle, Nyarlathotep cannot be chosen to receive a kill result. He can still be pained. So Nyarlathotep can freely go and fight huge armies of monsters, and no matter how many 6s they roll, none of the 6s apply to him. So he often goes in there alone in that case because he doesn't want to risk a monster being killed, and he's safe. The worst they can do is pain, and if they pain him, since he has madness, he can go wherever he wants. The one risk is, of course, that someone will catch you with the great old one and kill you. But, that's how it is. So, last but not least is the 1,000 Forms ability. If Nyarlathotep is on the map, this gives you a new ability which costs 1 point. I need to die. What this ability does is you roll. It costs 2 points. You spend 2 power. So if you're here at 8, you spend 2. And there's a requirement. You cannot have more power than every single other player. So they could be equal to you, but if they're all less than you, you can't do 1,000 Forms. You have to be tied or less than they are. You roll your die. Okay, say you roll a 3, like I did here. Then the other players have 1 minute to decide how they want to divide up that loss of power. They can refuse. They can say, we refuse to lose any power. If they do that, you get all the power. So if you roll a 6, you'd get 6 power, which makes them kind of want to spend the 6, but then they can't because, they don't want to give up their power. So you can use this to boost your power in the late game, or even if you don't boost it, say you roll a 6 and instead of giving you the power, they take the loss themselves. Well, that's still great for you, right? Now, of course, sometimes you'll spend 2 power, you only roll a 2 or a 1, but that's not too bad because that kind of gives you a waiting move. If you roll a 2, it goes down 2, and they don't spend the power, and they let you have it, then of course you're back where you started, but you've done nothing for that round, and your power hasn't reduced. Or if you roll a 1, it'll reduce 1. So yeah, 1 time out of 6, it's not as good for you. But given the great strength of this ability, another side effect of it is that players will sometimes try to spend their power down quick so they'll be lower than yours, so you'll have the most power, and then you can't use 1,000 Forms. But that has its own side effects of being great for you. And that's all about Nyarlathotep.